Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're opening up a really remarkable and I think, frankly, vital document. It's Jaime Hoerricks' Protective Spells for Autistic People, a grimoire against narcissists and other predators.
You know what strikes me right away about this material is just how fundamentally it flips the script on everything.
Right.
It moves so far away from that old narrative that autistic people are somehow defective and need to be fixed to survive in the world. Instead, this guide, this grimoire, as they call it, is all about reclaiming your internal authority, building real boundaries, and maybe most importantly, giving yourself permission to name what hurts.
I have to say, the framing of it as a grimoire is fascinating. It's not a typical self-help book. It's presented as a manual for self-protection, rooted in this really deep intentionality.
It is.
But do you think the author ever worries that using that kind of spiritual language, like spells, might obscure the very real, very logistical dangers here?
That's a great question, but I think the language is deliberate. It elevates the act of protecting yourself beyond just a trauma response.
Okay, so it's about agency.
Exactly. Hoerricks' core thesis is set right at the start. The danger is not in the traits of the autistic person. The danger lies in the world that learns how to read us long before it learns how to value us.
Wow, that line really hits hard.
It does, and it immediately places the responsibility for harm where it actually belongs on predatory behavior that exploits systemic invalidation.
So that's our mission for this deep dive then. We're going to unpack how that systemic harm works, especially with narcissistic dynamics, and then get into the practical counter strategies, the spells the author provides.
Right, and we have to start with what the source calls the training ground for harm. This is that systematic process that trains autistic people, often from childhood, to just completely doubt their own reality.
It's this relentless, almost invisible institutional conditioning. The source says that systems actively reduce confidence by treating autistic sincerity as if it's suspicious.
Or that clarity always has to be softened or apologized for.
Yes, exactly.
And think about the examples provided. They're so common. Schools punishing directness. Clinicians treating genuine overwhelm as if it's just, deviance.
Or workplaces demanding you apologize for noticing a contradiction that everyone else is just pretending not to see.
Right. The pattern is always narrating difference as a deficit. If your clarity is seen as aggressive, your honesty is rude, your sensory needs are an inconvenience, well, you become easier to manage.
And ultimately easier to exploit.
That's the connection.
That list of conditioning. It's almost painful to read because it shows how constant the pressure to mask really is. And this training, this invalidation, it sets the perfect stage for abuse.
It does.
If you're constantly told your perception is wrong, you learn to override your own recognition of harm. So abuse can flourish because you've been groomed to minimize it, or justify it, or just translate yourself for people who won't meet you halfway.
Which brings us directly to the first major defensive strategy in the book, the spell of naming.
And this is all about trusting your absolute first signal.
Yes. Seeing the pattern before the predator's whole performance even gets going.
The source describes these signals as deeply physical, doesn't it? A tightening in the chest or a flicker of confusion.
Or that really unsettling feeling of being gently but unmistakably steered somewhere you don't want to go.
Yeah.
The challenge is, autistic people feel this early, but they've been trained to wait for what the source calls proof that will satisfy someone else.
And that delay is what predators count on.
Entirely. Narcissistic dynamics rely on leveraging that delay. It starts warm, with mirroring what they call an emotional counterfeit. And that's when they're silently mapping your vulnerabilities.
And then the extraction phase begins, when your steadiness, your clarity becomes a resource for them to use.
Exactly.
This is where Hoerricks does something I find so useful, translating the clinical terms into lived experience. So love bombing, for instance.
Yes.
It's not just excessive attention. Hoerricks calls it intensity without resonance.
That distinction is so critical. Intensity without resonance.
Okay, so if you've been trained to ignore your own signals, how do you even tell the difference between that frantic intensity and a real connection?
The source clarifies it really well. Resonance feels expansive. It feels safe. Intensity, on the other hand, feels controlling and depleting, even when the words themselves are nice.
The discomfort is the data.
The discomfort is the data. That's the spell. The work isn't about convincing some neurotypical audience that harm happened. It's about restoring absolute trust in that first clear signal. That's your earliest protection.
So once you can name that signal, it leads to the next big question the book tackles. Why are autistic people targeted in the first place?
The spell of mirrors.
Right, and it forces you to confront those really painful, self-blaming narratives. You're too sensitive or you misunderstood. The source calls those harmful spells meant to keep you compliant.
It seems so counterintuitive, doesn't it? If autistic people are known for their clarity and loyalty, why would a predator seek them out?
Exactly. You'd think they'd want an easier target.
And that's the critical insight here. Predators target autistic individuals not because their traits are weak. It's because years of societal misreading and chronic invalidation have already primed them for exploitation.
So society has kind of softened the target for the abuser.
That's a good way to put it. It teaches them to ignore their own gut. Society rewards things like superficial charm and fluency, which are traits abusers weaponize.
Meanwhile, the actual traits of an autistic relational style like depth, principled truthfulness, loyalty,
All powerful forms of relational clarity. Abusers fear those qualities because they expose the emotional counterfeit. So those are the first things they have to neutralize.
which brings us to the counterincantations. I love this part. They're so concise and powerful.
They really are.
When someone says you're too sensitive, the counterspell is just, my sensitivity is information.
And when they insist you misunderstood, it's, my perception is coherent.
You're not arguing. You're just affirming your own reality to yourself.
Exactly. And the spell asks you to actively ground yourself in your strengths. There's a great exercise. Name 3 ways your core traits actually protect you.
Oh, I like that. So maybe your directness shields you from ambiguous manipulation.
Or your loyalty helps you avoid shallow transactional relationships. These aren't vulnerabilities. The book frames them as wards.
Okay, so let's talk about action. This leads us to the spell of boundaries. It's framed as quiet architecture, not a big dramatic conflict.
Right, it's about clarity, not theater. Boundaries are just the contour lines that allow the self to remain intact.
They don't require this huge justification.
No, they're just stated facts about what you will and will not accept.
So it's about using that direct, non-justified language. I'm not available for that.
That doesn't work for me. Or even just, I need to stop now.
And the source points out that the fragility we feel when setting boundaries, that's often because systems reward people who violate them. It's not a personal failure on our part.
And to check if that quiet architecture is actually holding up, the source offers those 5 questions for relational integrity. You have to ask yourself, does this feel consensual?
Reciprocal.
Yeah.
Resourced. Respectful.
And the last one, is this truly mine? If the answer to any of those is shaky, the interaction is already compromised. The boundary needs to speak up.
That ties perfectly into the spell of unmasking, which is about recognizing manipulation in real time before it completely hijacks your system.
Manipulation, Hoerricks clarifies, shows up as dissonance. It's that internal feeling of stepping back or freezing up even while the conversation is moving forward smoothly on the surface.
We have to learn to trust those microsignals of an internal fracture. So what are some of those key signals?
Engineered confusion is a big one, where clarity just keeps dissolving every time you try to grasp it. Sudden, extreme depletion, where conversation drains you way faster than it should. And also, that tendency toward reflexive apologizing for things that are clearly not your fault.
So the counterspells for gaslighting are purely internal. When someone insists you're misremembering, you don't argue with them.
No, you don't waste the energy. You internally remind yourself, my memory is coherent, the contradiction is informative. You just hold your internal frame steady.
Okay, so if we've set boundaries and we've identified the dissonance, the next stage is often the hardest, the spell of withdrawal. Why is this so difficult for autistic individuals, according to the source?
Because we are often groomed to stay and repair. It turns guilt and a really strong desire for fairness into a kind of functional leash.
So leaving feels like you're failing or abandoning someone.
Right, because you were trained to be responsible for the abuser's emotional regulation.
And the source validates that leaving can be genuinely treacherous because of what it calls structural traps, things like risking homelessness or losing health care.
Exactly. These are systemic problems that make independence dangerous, and they're designed to keep vulnerable people isolated. It's not a personal failure.
So withdrawal has to be seen as reclamation, not abandonment.
Precisely. And the spell offers a 3-step ritual. First, energetic pulling back attention. Then, emotional reminding yourself their feelings are not your job. And finally, logistical planning, the actual exit.
And using those short, solid anchor phrases, I need distance and won't be available. Or, this decision is final and I won't debate it.
Yes.
But safety can't just be an individual burden. especially when the structures are rigged against you. Which brings us to the crucial spell of collective protection.
This is so important. Safety is communal architecture. It means having practical strategies, like friend check systems.
People who trust your perception instantly without demanding a courtroom's worth of evidence.
Yes, without making you exhaust yourself with proof. It requires shared pattern recognition about coercion, so the knowledge doesn't just stay private and shame-soaked.
And the community promise, the collective ward, becomes, we believe each other, we trust the pattern, we defend the vulnerable.
You create these micro-communities where autistic perception is treated as wisdom, not as worry or pathology.
So the culmination of all this work, as the source puts it, it's the return of the inner witness, that part of you that was never fooled, just buried.
And when you reclaim that, your perception stops being a liability and it becomes your inheritance.
This book really isn't just offering tips, it's offering a historical context, claiming these spells are part of a long, quiet lineage of autistic self-defense.
It's a profound thought to end on. The source really asks us to consider, what does it mean to reclaim a sovereignty that the world never planned for, but fundamentally cannot remove?
A sovereignty born of attunement, precision, and that fierce refusal to abandon your own knowing. Just think about that. The path to safety isn't in compliant camouflage. It's in the principled, coherent truth-telling that the abusive world is most afraid of. That's really where the power of this deep dive lies today. We encourage you to explore that idea.